Hi, my name's Melissa Weisenfels, Executive Director here at MARKINC Ministries. Thank you so very much for your continued support of the Ask Dr. Better series. The following is not meant to substitute professional counseling, but instead is designed to extract biblical principles around the questions being asked. We encourage you to seek professional help if needed.
Hi, I'm Dr. Chuck Betters. One of the questions that I personally have raised in my lifetime is, are we to seek suffering? Are we to look for it? Are we to move away from it? Are we to do everything in our power possible to avoid suffering? And really, that's the question this person is asking. Are we called as Christians to avoid suffering? Or are we to move into suffering or towards suffering for the sake of service or being like Christ? You know, one of the historical facts that we know as we study church history is that the early church suffered great martyrdom. There were many martyrs in the early church. Up until the time of Constantine, around 325 AD, Christians suffered horrendously. And then even later, after the Christian faith was declared the world's religion by Constantine, even after that, there was great suffering from many people as Christians for being Christians. And in the early church, they developed an understanding of suffering, a doctrine, if you will, of suffering that went something like this. If you seek martyrdom, you were cast out of the church. If you looked for it, if you actually sought to become a martyr, you were considered self-glorifying. You were considered looking to become a martyr for your own sake, for your own reputation, for your own legacy. And the early church frowned on that. In fact, they would discipline people who sought martyrdom. Martyrdom was to be avoided. It was a calling to become a martyr. It was God's calling on your life, and to invade that calling with some sort of self-interest, with some sort of desire to suffer so that others will look at you as this marvelous person who is enduring great suffering, was really frowned upon in the early church. Listen to what the Apostle Peter says about suffering. He says in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 12, he says, "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed." So he says, don't be surprised or shocked when suffering hits you. It's part and parcel to living out the Christian life. You're going to suffer. Jesus promised that. He says, in this world, you will have persecution or suffering. So Peter comes along and says, well, don't be surprised when and if that happens. It's going to happen. Naturally, by you becoming a Christian, you are living a life that is contrary to the world's view of what life ought to be. It's life in the flesh that they have. It's life in the spirit that you have. And the two clash. But Peter goes a little bit further. He says this in verse 14, "If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory and of God rest upon you." So if you're going to suffer because somebody has insulted you over the name of Christ, over the fact that you are wearing that name, then rejoice. Feel as though something great is happening to you. Don't look for it. But when it happens, rejoice, he says. Be glad because you're suffering for the name of Christ. But then he has this caution. He says, "But let none of you suffer as a murderer or a thief or an evildoer or as a meddler. Let none of you suffer those things. If anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in that name. For the time is come for judgment to begin in the household of God. And if it begins with us, what will be the outcome for those who do not obey the gospel of God? And if the righteous is scarcely saved, what will become of the ungodly and the sinner? In other words, there's another way to suffer. You can suffer because of your own sinfulness, because of your own evil doing. You can suffer because you have sinned, and suffering comes as the result of sin. But you can't glorify God for that. You can't look at that and say, I'm thanking God because of my own sinfulness, I'm suffering. He says if you're going to suffer, you need to suffer as a Christian because you're a Christian in the name of Christ because of your faith in him. So to seek suffering is one thing, to suffer because of your own sinfulness is another thing. I hope this helps.